Okay, so it's going. Okay. All right, so when we start shading, we have our light source. We have to establish that first, right? That is where your lighting is coming from. So what is always going to be opposite your light source? What lives down here?
The shadow.
The shadow. Very good. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is we always want to create really smooth gradients. So what is a gradient? Does anyone remember? I'll give you a clue. It has to do with this.
From one color to the next.
Very good. So it's a shift from one value to the next. So in this case, it's the shift from dark to medium to light, okay? So if I said to you, wow, those are really smooth gradients, that means that you have a very good transition from the dark to medium to the light, okay? And it's done very smoothly and it's blended very nicely. So our goal is to always have really nice gradients, and we also want our gradients to have a lot of contrast. So when I'm saying contrast, I'm talking about extreme darks versus extreme lights, because that's what makes an object look dimensional, right? So in this case, let's take a look at our Croqui figure, okay? The first thing that we're going to do is we want to establish a light source for the Croqui figure. So we have to be aware, like, where is that lighting coming from? Because all the shadows that fall throughout the figure are going to be opposite that consistently. So just for today's lesson, I'm going to choose for our light source to be on the upper left, and I want you to draw a little light bulb. That's going to be our visual reminder of where our lighting is coming from. Okay, so do that now. Take a second. Draw yourselves a little light bulb. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to practice before we even start shading or rendering on the figure is another technique with shading. So when we're shading, what do you think makes more sense? Do we use the point of the pencil or do we use the side of the pencil?
Side.
Side. Why the side? Why is it a much better choice?
It's like a line just there.
Exactly, it's much smoother. So like if you're trying to use the point of your pencil, you're going to get like a lot of spacing in between. It's not going to be super smooth. The side of your pencil allows you to apply your color very evenly, very smoothly, right? Just like that. So before we even start shading our figure, we're going to practice doing what I like to call shading tornadoes. So this is where we start out, and do this along with me. You could try this on another sheet of paper or next to your Croqui. I want you to press down with your pencil. You're going to give it some gusto, go nice and dark, press hard. So this is literally the technique is called using pencil pressure. That's actually the technique. And the harder you press with your pencil, what's going to happen is the value going to be light or dark if you're pressing hard.
Dark.
Dark, very good. And then if you adjust your pencil pressure and you start to press lighter and lighter and lighter, your values become lighter, okay? And you'll notice I'm not even picking up my hand from the page, and I'm getting a very nice smooth gradient, but I'm pressing lighter and lighter and lighter as I go. And by the time it's like so light, you want it to almost blend into the white of the page, okay? You can always go back in and fix things and layer a little bit after, but this is what I'm referring to as a shading tornado. So I want you to practice several of these on the page first and get a feel for using pencil pressure. Press nice and hard. Okay, change your pencil pressure as you move along. Go lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter until it's almost matching the white of the page. Okay? And I want you to do several of them. So why do you think I want you to continue to do many of them on the page? How is that helpful when we're learning how to shade?
Remember?
Ah, beautiful. Who just said that? Was that Rachel?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So Rachel, what's muscle memory?
Muscle memory is basically the repeated actions you kind of get the hang of how to do a specific task that gets easier and easier.
Exactly. That was a beautiful definition. That was perfect. Exactly. So like you get a sense, like you get a feel for something and it becomes very commonplace for you to do it. Athletes do this all the time. They use their muscle memory. They're so used to doing a certain movement all the time. It's no different from artists. So I want you to get that feeling, that muscle memory for what it feels like to create a really nice blended smooth gradient. Okay, what it feels like to ease up on your pencil pressure, what it feels like to really push down with your pencil, and so on and so forth. And it builds confidence because you're like, I've got this. Like, I'm used to doing this all the time. It's just so natural to me. And that's how it should feel when you're shading. From now on, it should just be a very familiar thing. Okay? All right, we're going to move on from the shading tornadoes, and let's take a look at our croquis. Okay, so now when we're looking at our croquis figure, the first part of the body that we're going to start with is going to be the head. Typically, that's where you should always start. So if you didn't do it yet, just once again, draw a little light bulb for yourself so we know that our light source is coming from the upper left, and our shadow is going to be on the bottom right. So I'm actually going to start shading her face first. I'm using the side of my pencil, and I'm locating the bottom right, and I'm going to press harder over here, and as I work my way up her face, it's going to be lighter and lighter and lighter as I go. And I'm actually going to continue my shading straight into her hair, so if you have hair drawn there, just continue straight into that, because we want to be consistent. Don't be alarmed if it looks like a beard at first. Because once we actually work with our shading a bit more, it's not going to look so strange. Okay, so you'll notice I'm even continuing up to the back of her skull. And there's another technique that I'm using. I'm curious if anyone picks up on it. It has to do with the direction that I'm shading her face. Let's see, did anyone pick up on it yet? Okay, so basically I'm not shading, you'll notice I'm not just shading straight across, sideways or horizontally. I'm working with the form of her face, right? The form of her face is an oval or an egg shape that we've talked about. And so I'm actually intentionally curving my lines as I shade. I'm curving my pencil strokes. Why am I doing that?
So that it flows across the face better.
Exactly. And it gives the illusion of form, right? Okay. Now I'm going to shade her ears. So closest to the head, there's going to be like a little cast shadow, and then we work our way out from there. It gets lighter. Okay. And before I add some more details to the face, I want everyone to try something with me. And you can remind me if we went over this before, but it's always good to remember this. It has to do with overlapping. So I want you to put your hands together like this. Did we do this together, guys? No? Okay. So try this with me. Put your hands together. Your two pointer fingers should be touching. Right now, our hands are in the same plane, right? It means that they're like the same, they're level with each other. Is that true? Like on the same layer. And now I want you to only lower your right hand. And you'll notice something happening. Your left hand is casting something on the right hand. What is it casting? You can take a look at your hand if it's easier. A shadow, exactly. So they're not on the same plane. Like right now, my left hand is overlapping the right. It's casting a shadow. So that's the next super important thing to pay attention to. Whenever an object overlaps another object, it's going to have a cast shadow. So just like we saw over here with the spheres themselves are casting a shadow on the ground, right? Because it's sitting on top of the ground. Well, when we look at the Croqui figure, when we have certain body parts overlapping another body part, or if there's a garment overlapping skin, for example, there's going to be a cast shadow there. So in order to finish the face, I just want to point out a couple of things. So the hair itself is layered on top of the skin, and I'm just going to very lightly indicate a cast shadow where that hairline is. Okay? So we're getting a little detailed with this right now. And then that's also why, like where the ears connect to the face will actually create a cast shadow on the ears. So where the ears are connected, you're going to have some shading in there as well. We're also going to have shadow occur down the bridge of the nose. So if you have a nose already drawn on your Croqui figure, you can include the shadow there. Noses are typically just defined by shadowing. And then where the eyelids are, where the crease of the eye is, you can also add a little bit of shadowing as well. Eventually, after this project, we're going to get more detailed with faces, but I am just showing you some basic things so that it doesn't look so strange at first, but it's like when you start to add the shading, look, I'm even going to add some shadowing on the other side of the bridge of the nose. And where the lips separate, the upper lip tends to be darker than the lower lip, which we'll talk about why another time. But I just want you to see this so that the face looks a little more beautiful and normal. Okay. But there you go. Now you see it. But it really is just a sphere at the end of the day. We'll do a little bit in the cheekbones, define that a little bit more. Okay, so moving along from the face, the next body part that we're going to establish is the neck, okay, because it's connected to the face. What is the basic shape of the neck? Give me a three-dimensional shape. Okay, a cylinder, exactly. So the neck is really a glorified cylinder. So we see that our light bulb is coming from the left, so our shadow is going to fall to the right, okay? So let's just start shading darkest to the right, and then we're going to work our way left, okay? And as we get towards our light source, we go lighter and lighter and lighter on the opposite side. Okay, so we're creating just a smooth gradient at that neck. We're going to have a nice blend. And you'll notice I shaded right into these little bumps over here. Does anyone know what these bumps are? Very good, exactly. That's the part of the anatomy. It's also called the clavicle. That's the technical term. So you can even push on your own collarbone, but you will notice that it does pop up, right? It has dimension. In fashion, we have a tendency to really draw and define collarbones because it's considered very beautiful and very glamorous for them to kind of pop out. And you'll notice if you press down on your own collarbone, you can try this, it dips in, right? The bone actually dips in, like where it connects to the neck. So naturally behind your collarbone, even though technically the left-hand side is where my light is hitting, there's still going to be shadow behind the collarbone on the left-hand side because it does dip in, and we want to give that illusion of a little bit of dimension there. So that's just a little detail that I would add. Okay. The other thing is that underneath the chin itself is going to cast shadow, and it's going to mimic the shape of the chin as well. It's going to be kind of like a rounded, a very slight rounded V shape or a U shape. And that's the cast shadow right there. So if you had that on its own, it would look very funny, but the fact that we already have other shading on the figure, it doesn't stand out. It doesn't look like a beard. So if it was by itself, it would look like that, but right now, that the fact that we're adding it to all the other elements, it's not going to stand out or look funny. But that is a detail that I would add. Okay, so now let's take a look at her arm. What is the basic shape of her arm? Give me a three-dimensional shape. What can we compare it to?
Cylinder.
A cylinder. Very good. And for the most part, you're going to notice that throughout the body, it's mostly cylinders or cones, okay? So that's what we can compare it to. But it's very straightforward. So once again, opposite light source, we have our shadow. So light's on the left, shadow is going to fall on the right. So we're just going to kind of move along because I think we pretty much get that idea by now. And I'm going darkest on my right. And then I'm going to ease up my pencil pressure as I'm coming towards the left as I follow the shape of that cylinder. Okay? And then, what about, so this is actually the upper arm. What about her forearm where it's bending? How would we handle this area? What do you think? Where do you think that shading would fall? Would it fall down here on the inner part or would it fall on the outer part? Okay. So the shadow is going to fall on the inner part because two reasons. First off, opposite our light source, this really is the left. Okay, that's number one. But number two, you'll notice, you see there's that little fold, there's that bend from the upper arm. That upper arm is actually overlapping this. So I'm going to curve my shading because it is like a cone shape, this arm. I'm going to curve it. And then I'm going to work my shadow up. I'm going to get lighter as I go up towards my highlight. And you'll also notice that the face itself is overlapping and casting a shadow onto the arm itself. So it's going to be a little darker in this area in general. You want to create that illusion. So I'm starting to curve it. And you notice I went back in and I enhanced my dark even more because I really want it to pop. Okay? All right, so now just follow along with me down the rest of the body. So, okay, we're getting to the whole torso area. The torso itself, or the chest and then into the hips, it really is, we can call it almost like two cone shapes where it's sort of cylindrical in its own right. So the same exact principles are going to follow through. We're going to go dark to medium to light. However, we also have the bust. And you'll notice that there's like a little line of the bust right here. The bust, believe it or not, really starts with the armpit. And so you want to shade darker if it's showing up in your Croqui figure, like where the bust is starting from. And then work your way down. Okay? We'll get back to the bust in a second. And then, once again, adjust your pencil pressure. You're going to go lighter and lighter as you go towards your light source. In this case, it's on the left. Work our way down. Okay. And then I'm actually going to add some shadow. Even though our light source is on the left, I'm still going to add some shadow right over here because the truth is the bust is overlapping the rib cage, and underneath the bust itself, you should be adding some shading as well. Because naturally it's going to cast a shadow. It does get defined. So I am curving it underneath. And I'm going to continue it down this way. And you'll also notice that I'm starting to work with the curvature of like where like the rib cage would be. I'm not just blending perfectly straight either. I'm working with the curves of the body. I'm really trying to follow how those curves are going, that sort of hourglassy shape. Okay, and now when it comes to the bust area, in between the bust, there's going to be like a little bit of like a separation there. Naturally, that's how it occurs. It almost creates like a little triangular shape in between. And then you treat them just like you would the spheres in your homework. So it's really no different. There's a curvature there. Okay. Darkest from the left, and then it gets lighter as you go towards the right. And the same thing's going to happen with the bust on this side. Okay. And you might have noticed I'm also bringing in the other part of the collarbone underneath that would exist right there. I'm actually mimicking, it's almost like a little upside down check sign underneath where the collarbone would be. So I just added that because I'm aware of the anatomy right there. Okay. And I'm really trying to round this out. Okay. And then we work our way towards the other arm. And the inside of the arm where it's right next to the body, because this is the left-hand side, you're going to get shadow over here. And B, because the body itself will actually cast shadow right where that's connecting to that arm, where that arm faces into the body will produce a shadow there. Now, you'll notice that the arm slightly goes behind the body where the hip is. So I'm also shading into that area because that hip is casting a shadow. Okay. And then I'm working my way right into the hands. Okay. How are we doing on time, by the way? Can someone give me like a little time check? 7 minutes. Okay, great. All right, so we're working into the hand. And then a little detail. So in this particular croquis, she kind of has like underwear drawn in. And even if they were tight underwear, it would still overlap the body. So I just want to show you a very subtle detail that we're going to learn going forward. But you always want to create a little bit of shading next to the edge of a garment where it meets the skin, because that garment is going to produce a little bit of a cast shadow, and it makes a difference. Okay? And so just kind of like working our way down. See, I'm purposely adding the cast shadow underneath the underwear over here. And you're going to notice that I curve my shadow with the leg because once again, I'm trying to work that form in. Same thing here. Okay, and so we can't forget our lighting is coming from the left. And our shadows to the right. And the legs are really just glorified tubes. That's all they are. So it's no different than doing the arms. We can literally just block in all of our shadowing very quickly down the leg. Follow the shape of the leg. That tubular kind of shape. All the way down. And sometimes, even though my highlight's on this side, I like to put the slightest bit of shading on the edge because I feel like it finishes it. And I'm talking about the right-hand side. Okay, and then in this case, for this leg, it's the same thing. Your shadow's going to fall to the right. We'll work our way down. All the way down. Okay, and I'm going to put a shadow on the inner part of the leg, even though my lighting is coming from the left. Does anyone know why I'm doing that? Want to venture a guess why I'm purposely placing the shadow there? Okay. It's because yeah, exactly. And usually like with the inner parts of the body, so like if it's like the insides of the legs, for example, they tend to cast shadows on each other. So that's why I'm putting it there. Okay, and we would continue all the way down. And I'm just going to show you, you see how this leg overlaps the other? Behind that leg is going to be a shadow cast onto the other leg. And then where it also overlaps on this side, there's going to be shadow. And we work our way down. And right where the edge of this shoe is, I'm putting shadow because the shoe itself will cast shadow onto the skin. Okay? And the shoes, we follow suit. It's like really no different with how we're doing our shading and all of our blending. Okay? This part of the shoe casts a shadow on the heel. Okay? The underwear, it's the same thing. Okay? You would just continue. You can even kind of go straight through and mimic how your shading is in the other areas on the underwear. But right in here, you can kind of define where it meets the leg a little bit more. And then as a final detail, where the hand itself is going to also cast a shadow onto the skin, and it's going to mimic the shape of the hand. Even these little fingers that stick out, okay, it's going to have a cast shadow as well. Okay, and this is essentially the end result with the body. Okay, did this make sense for everyone today when we're looking at the basic forms and how the lighting and how all the shadows fall?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So I'm going to stop our tutorial right there. And here, let me just stop it.